and welcome to this episode 197 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop into a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest Jacques Jouffret, ASC, DP of American Primeval. Enjoy. I was looking at your IMDb and I was like, wait a minute. So one music video and then The Purge. How did that happen? And then I went to your camera operator credits and I was like, holy shit. Like, you've worked on every movie.
Yeah, you know what? I was a camera operator for a very long time. And actually that was not my intention was never to move up to a DP. And it just happened. But I was having too much fun as a camera operator for many years. And working with some great directors, and then I worked with Michael Bay for a very long time. I've done 5 movies with Michael as his camera operator, and I think it's between we did Transformers 3, and then I did Pen and Again. And during that time, he told me, listen, I'm producing this little budget movie. I don't know much about it. I'm producing it, but I don't really know much about the producing team. I'm not sure who they are. I like the script. Why don't you meet the director and why don't you shoot it for me? This way you can do that before we do Pen and Again, and then you can meet us and do Pen and Again. I said, okay. And then I met the director, and that movie ended up being The Purge.
Yeah.
And so that's basically how my career as a director of photography started, pretty much.
Yeah, because I was looking through, your Steadicam, because it's kind of insane. Because I remember seeing Gummo in high school, which is a weird movie to watch in high school.
Yeah.
But to go from that and The One, which I think The One might be the ultimate early 2000s action film.
Yeah.
Just because the soundtrack is so of the time, obviously Jet Li's incredible, but I have a very large soft spot for that film.
It's so funny because Gummo, people constantly ask me about Gummo. I think of the 2 movies that I'm being asked the most that I worked on in my career, every shoot, there's going to be someone who's going to come to me and ask me about Gummo and Into the Wild.
Sure.
Those are the 2 movies that I'm constantly being asked about. And then Gummo was very interesting because I just finished NYU. I went to film school in New York University, and just starting. And I used to be in New York, and I just moved to LA. And I could not. I just could not. Get there, and I flew and I worked with Jean-Yves Escoffier, a great DP, and who that I met that time.
Yeah, I mean, people probably, it'd be like if you worked on Salo or something. People are like, so what was that like? Not that Gummo's that aggressive, but it's just one of those films that certainly, scars you.
So it was quite an experience working with another French DP.
Yeah, I bet. Because the ones that I wrote down, I'm surprised no one ever asked you about Seabiscuit or even Man on Fire.
Man on Fire, I'm being asked a lot about Man on Fire. Yeah,
I've received that as reference a lot.
Yeah, Man on Fire, Tony Scott.
Yeah,
quite an experience.
These conversations are intended to be 50-50 entertainment and education, but I feel like I'm in a privileged position. I've interviewed 200 some odd DPs.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've learned a lot, but I imagine you working, as the A-Cam or Steadicam op for all of these incredible directors the jump to DP probably was easier than most people just by virtue of how much you've learned on all of these incredible, in many times, Oscar winning or whatever films.
Very much. I think it's not a standard way. I think I would say 80-70% of DPs come from lighting, not camera, and I think you look at it in a very different way, I would say, and I think you have a tendency. I do have a tendency, to start with the camera position, and I think maybe if you go a different way, people start with the lighting position. Not one is better than the other, but I've definitely is definitely that makes a big difference. I think the other difference being a camera operator, you understand the logistic of this big machine that is working, that is making a movie. I mean, I do understand, I have a very good sense of how long everything takes.
Mm.
And therefore, it gives me a sense, okay, you want to do this in 2 days and everyone use that tool? I don't think so. I have a very good sense of time and say, oh, I don't think you're going to get as much as you think you're going to get by going that way. And therefore, that informs the way I work very much strongly, the way I work. I think also what I'm being told is that I have a very good sense where the camera needs to be.
Mm.
And not because I'm smarter or more talented than others, simply because for 25 years, that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
So I've got a very good sense, okay, the camera's going to go there, the camera's going to go there, and sure enough, it is. So I think many DPs, if you go from lighting, you have a very good sense, I want to put the 18K here, I want to do this. I think I go the opposite way. Okay, I know where the camera is going to go, and therefore I know where the lighting can go.
Yeah. I think I suppose I come from the camera side, but as I got better, I certainly set the lights first.
Yeah.
Because it just in my head, I suppose it just what it is, it's working indie for so long that a lot of times, I'll maybe have like one guy helping me, one gaffer or whatever, or I'm having to do the lighting myself. And it's much more like wherever it is, I just meet the light, where it is. It's I don't get to structure it as much. So
I think, you need to structure it very much, because I'm not just thinking about one shot. I'm thinking about, okay, how does the scene can evolve? And what is the problem that I'm going to face if the scene evolves over here or over there? Well, how is my lighting going to have to change or not? Do I want that or do I don't want that? So you're always thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. This way you do not interrupt, the director's work with the actor, or you don't make them wait as long as they need, particularly when they are in a moment in that scene. So that's the way my mind is most of the time. So, a scene, is coming in, and, you already have that conversation with the director, how you want to shoot that film. What is your process? What is the style? And I call this, the sandbox. What is in a sandbox where we are going to play? And what are the toys in that sandbox? And to achieve the look, the style that you want. Is everything going to be on a dolly? Is everything going to be on the handheld? It's going to be both. It's going to be on the crane. Are we going to do only close-up? Are we going to do only watch-out? What are the toys in that? That's for me where I start with when I start working with the director. And then, okay, so all those tools are there. So therefore, you already have made a lot of decisions. To that already is going to end up being the look of your movie, the style of your movie. Is it going to be all smooth? Is it going to be all, all jerky handheld? Are you going to do 60 takes? Or are you just going to do one take and you're good to go and you want to change? All of those things. So that's really what I try to get from a director. And then, you adapt yourself. Okay. So if you are going to do a shot, if you want to go on a dolly and you expect to do 20 takes or 30 takes, okay, that tells me a lot. That'd be okay. So I'm going to have the time to figure out what I want to do next. I want to put and where I want to put my light. If on the other hand, you want to do a shot and you want to do it handheld or very quickly, and every time you say again, you want the camera operator to change the angle, okay, that's going to inform me the way I'm going to have to light. What I can do and what I cannot do.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, especially with your experience in action films, that probably informs a lot of like just how fast you're able to work.
Absolutely. And how much you want to clear the set for the director, not get in his way. I mean, I think the way I approach my work is that I am not, as a DP, going to impose the way I'd like to work, to the director. No, the contrary, you are going to impose to me the way you want to work, and me and my team need to adapt ourselves to your style. So if you are going to, to do action film, I think action film is a good plan because they are very hard to make.
Yeah.
Compared to a film where it's mostly 2 characters or 3 characters when there's a dialogue. there is so many different logistic elements that you have to take in consideration, knowing, okay, can I put an 18K here or not? Should I put it? How much trouble am I going to get? What is the best way to go about that? I don't want to waste the time. I know it's going to turn around this way. How much time do I have? So I think part of the DP, and that comes from being a camera operator, is that we talk a lot about the DP's work, and the lighting, and the reference and the sensibility. But there is an aspect of us where we are logistics.
Right.
How much tools do I have? What is the manpower that I have? How much time that production is giving me to achieve what my director wants me to achieve? And a lot of the work that I do is trying to figure out those two things and find where I can meet.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of DPs this past week. I think I've done like 9, and something that comes up a lot is just especially on like television shows where maybe you have a lower budget, or you're on a shoot that only has. Eric Kortz was telling me he did a movie a while back where he had, not a while back, it was like a couple years ago, where he had like 24 days for the whole film. And I'm always interested in what like the approach is when given either a modest budget or a modest time scale. Like what are those nice to haves that end up going away? Do you start just combining everything into a oneer, or do you just go like, one establishing shot, let's get some coverage?
It depends. I mean, interesting. I mean, you take, for example, the first Purge. The first Purge was shot in 15 days.
Good job.
And I remember working with a director when I interviewed with a director, and think about it, that when I interviewed for that film, and Michael wanted me to do it, I was not particularly keen on doing it. But I knew exactly, you want to shoot a movie in 15 days? Okay, I'll tell you, you're going to shoot a movie in 15 days. And that's basically the way I approached the interview with the director. You want to do that? Okay, this is what you're going to do. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have any seat. You're not going to have video village. We're going to shoot one camera. You're going to have one zoom, and that's basically about it. And there's not going to be video. There's not going to be any shotguns of anything. And you're never going to have the time to go to the bathroom.
Yes. Yeah. You got to do.
And therefore, for me, say, if we're going to, okay, that inform a lot of the type of lighting that I will do. Okay, I won't be able to relight for every shot. What can I do in that sense? I'm not going to have the time. I think also how you use your manpower. Who do you need? I think, for example, a mistake that I find low-budget movie makes is that there is a tendency, so you don't have the best crew, you get, because usually the pay is very low, which was the case on The Purge and many low-budget movies, which is interesting because it's the low-budget movie where you need the top guys.
Right.
Because there is no reshoot, there is no rehearsal. The first AC doesn't even have the time to put marks on the floor. So you need the top guy who is able to do it. And yet most of the time, you get the guy who just came out and that barely have very little experience. And the producer refused to hire the top guy because he wants to save $5 on the when you actually need the most.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So I think coming from camera, I'm very aware of all of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's the phrase that I always kind of jokingly tell clients is like, all right, it's the classic triangle of good, cheap, or fast, and you can only pick 2.
That's right.
We don't
so,
get to
okay, so if you work with your producer and you say, I'm really need an amazing first AC, where can I lose money? Somewhere else that you can afford that. So it's a lot of that, I think it's more important to me. You say, okay, well, if you want this, you're not going to have the technocrane on that day that you want it. I say, okay, fair enough. This is more important to me.
Yeah. Well, I just looking at your list of films, I was kind of hoping that you could maybe give some, like, not necessarily bullet points, you go as much detail as you can, but things you learned on these specific, because like they're so very, like, obviously with Tony Scott, that's a film that's a masterclass there. Obviously Michael Bay, that's a masterclass.
It's interesting you say, those two, and I would say Pete Berg. Take Tony Scott, Michael Bay, and Pete Berg. I think of all the three, the one that I learned the most is Michael Bay. I mean, Michael, when I did the first Transformer with him, I was already maybe 12 years into my career as a camera operator, and but it completely destroyed me and rebuilt me as a camera operator, and learned a tremendous amount from Michael. Learned tremendous from Tony and Pete. I think of all the three, my sensibility artistically is closer to Pete. But Tony, the use of the long lens. You see that in American Primeval, the constant back and forth between the long lens and the very intimate, in-your-face camera work. The camera placement. Michael and Tony, they knew exactly all the thinking going with every time you put where you put the camera, and how you can get the biggest bang for the buck where you place that camera. Stunning is the lesson that I've learned. Michael Bay, graphic eye, incredible, just incredible. The great thing that I learned with Michael, he would set a shot, and it's one of the first directors that he would set a shot, and you had no idea what he would set that shot for, and you realize he was not choosing that shot for what was in front. He was shooting it for what was in the background. He was choosing his background, and then you had to make work what was happening in front of it. Very interesting.
I think that's something that, I could be wrong. I think that's something that David Fincher does as well. His compositions are incredibly
incredible. I just did commercial with Fincher.
Really?
Oh yeah, I did. I think also a Budweiser commercial with Brad Pitt, and extremely careful on the framing when every single thing is set properly, and everything has something to say visually. I think for all those directors is almost putting in one frame as much visual information as you can, basically packing in visual information that if you pay attention to it, there is so much that is given to you from the story in one frame, and extremely economical.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by, especially obviously being on the Indian, specifically doc side for me, sort of what not to do to maintain that economy of motion and to be able to achieve at that level while still moving quickly and obviously.
I would say, and that's true for many directors that I've worked with, is I think I find when you shoot the films or series, there is always a reason why not to shoot. Your work is to constantly push, let's shoot now. There is always a reason you're waiting for that. The makeup is not ready. There is a special effect that is doing. Always a reason. And a lot of it is to keep moving forward and say, no, let's shoot now. Or even if you're not ready, just shoot. And I find there were very courageous directors who are willing to throw the dice. Let's rock and roll. Even if we're not ready, let's rock. And you always have some kind of spontaneity and magic happening. And so I've got the enormous respect for all the directors that I work for and with as a camera operator or as a DP.
Yeah, well, and especially with the more VFX heavy stuff you've done, there's certainly a lot of approaches. Obviously, Neil Blomkamp. I have, I know you were just admitted to the ASC a couple of years ago. I got your, your name front and center on this one. Yeah. It was funny. I was like, I'm pretty sure I've seen his name on set. And then I went over to my little stack. I was like, yeah, it's literally dead center. I don't think they've ever put anyone's name dead center on the magazine before.
And Neil Blomkamp, amazing director. I was so happy to work for him, and it's too bad because he's doing a project I won't be able to be part of because of my schedule. And very much a director of that level in terms of understanding directing and it's interesting because you say you come from documentary. All of them has a very much a documentary approach. And I would say that the kind of a film, particularly with CGI nowadays and the predominance of CGI is, I think it's becoming very, very hard to make a film that's real.
Right.
And there's we have a tendency, all of us, and myself included, of we have a tendency to go into the cartoon world because so much CGI is involved and we have so much control, and maybe we have too much control. And then sometimes I always go back and watch movies, older movies, from the 70s or 80s, and you say, man, they look so real. And us, we are getting too much control from the camera, from the sensors, from everything that it's always a challenge. And I'm always a challenge as I get more and more into cinematography. Am I doing too much? Am I controlling too much? I should let go. I should let it go.
So you're saying you like sort of letting the work speak to you instead of
Yeah, it's
imposing.
not control it, don't accept because you can. It's not because you can manipulate this or controlling that you should.
Mm.
It's always, just wait, you when you shoot, you are in an emotional state and so I don't like this or I don't like that. And then you're looking at it later on and say, why I was obsessing about that.
Right.
And I should have let it go and it would feel more true. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I remember when District 9 came out, that was I to your point about like things feeling real. I remember I was like 20 at the time. I remember feeling like that was the first sci-fi film I had seen that felt real because of just, and I learned later, obviously, it was just like we just shot it and then we figured out the VFX after, which is an insane way to do it. But
And that's very true. I mean, I think if you find something in my career, the director that I like is the one that are looking for that.
mm,
And it doesn't matter what is the subject matter of it. It doesn't matter if it's a romantic comedy or if it's a sci-fi, or if it's an action film, or if it's a interior drama. The point is to make it look as real as possible. I want the audience to suspend their disbelief and believe completely that this is happening. And Neil on this will not manage completely to do that. And that's really much the North Star of working with Spielberg or Michael. Even if Michael did all those incredible Transformer films, that are completely unreal in a sense, are not part of our world, but you're looking at it and you say it feels real. I mean, the beauty about working with the Transformers is that it's the great way to see, how you can make a world where the main characters are cartoon.
yeah.
Are cartoon. So let's not create the environment as cartoon, otherwise it's going to look like a cartoon. So let's make everything real. And the great thing that I've learned with on that franchise is all the action, the explosion, the car exploding, the building falling down, all this is real.
Right.
Very cool practical effect. None of it is CGI. The only thing that is CGI are the character itself. And that is, and you're looking at it today, 10 years later, and they hold up very, very well.
Yeah. Well, and that is something now that you mentioned like some of the older films that I think is maybe not lost, but maybe not considered as much. Maybe especially with the younger filmmakers, is you'll look back at like I'm a big special features nerd. I like getting the Blu-ray and watching behind the scenes, and there would always be like in I think it might have been like the third Jurassic Park or something. There's a scene where the one of the dinosaurs like goes running through a city street.
Yeah.
And they had built, except for the dinosaur, they had built all, the car implodes, like a flag moves and stuff. They're like, the dinosaur will go through this. We need to put all its steps in the way.
That's right. That's why then we do the same with the Transformers. I'm thinking about the Transformer walking in a desert and coming towards us, and then you would tilt down to the footsteps, which obviously are not there, but special effect had set up some kind of a circle with there every time one just to get the real effect of it. And just all of this makes a big difference. And obviously you could do it CGI.
Right.
Yeah, definitely with the Transformers, that was the really big learning lesson, is constantly everything as real as possible.
Well, and imagine for being a camera operator as well, it's way easier to react to something than nothing. The dinosaur will go through here. You go, all right. You just
that was a big challenge for me as the main camera operator on the Transformers. It's just that my actors are not there.
Right.
You constantly having to say timing wise, okay, that car is going to come in and it's going to blow through this way. and he's going to reach and he's going to bang into this building, and that building is going to fall apart and explode. Then I've got to tilt up, to the guy when he picks up the second car, and then throw it and pan and catch that piece going on. All of it is real. So which means I've got to be there when that car hits the thing.
Right.
Oh, wow. That was the challenge. That was the stress.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I was interested in is you actually had probably, I think he was maybe my third or fourth guest on the show 5 years ago. But Tobias.
Yeah.
And then obviously with Larry Sher and John Sella and Sarensen. Like I was wondering, obviously learning from directors is one thing, but learning from your peers is another. Like between those four at least, like what are those conversations that you have at your level of filmmaking that you get to take from them and go, oh, I'm doing that in the future?
Yes, and I know all the one. Obviously, I work for all those for those directors, DPs, Larry Sher, and Jonathan, and you learn. I think the one that made a big influence for me is DP who passed away. His name is Harris Salides.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I did one movie with him. I did plenty of commercial, but I did one movie with him, Greenberg. And he was an amazing DP, and but he's really the first one that explained to me the way it works, and the way he's lighting, the way with light, and the way he's thinking about it, and the way it's processed. And when he talked to me, that's the first time that I said, "Oh, I got it."
Really?
Oh, I can do this. I know how to do this. And I find that when you go to film school and you take lighting class, I think they don't teach it very well.
Yeah.
I think, we have a tendency, when we go to film school, you find yourself on the sound stage and you start learning key light, backlight, fill light. And, they usually press a woman, on a chair, just to teach you all this. I think it is the wrong way. I think it's not really the best way to explain lighting, because we go from it from a technical standpoint as opposed to coming from an emotional standpoint. And lighting is emotion. And I think with Harris, when he started talking to me, the way I think he was talking from an emotional standpoint. And that I completely got it. I said, oh, I got it. And there's many others, that I worked for afterward that influenced me more. There's another DP that I have a great fondness for. I did a couple of projects with him. Is Kramer Morgenthau.
Oh, sure, yeah. I've talked to him.
Yes, and I did this movie a long time ago called The Express. And we have very much, I realize now myself as a DP, I do a lot of what I saw Kramer doing in his own work. And I mentioned it to him one day recently. And so you pick up things, and particularly all the movies that I've watched. I spend my life watching movies. I think, I would consider myself much more kind of a one light DP, when you have one light that lights pretty much everything. So I think Vittorio Storaro is very important for me. Vittorio is very much, the type of film lighting that I have a tendency to go for most of the time. Yeah. But you pick up things with everyone. And I've been very fortunate. I think it's very, very fortunate to have been such a long career as a camera operator, working with so many different DPs who have so many different ways of lighting, so many different approach. And it's such a wonderful experience to see, oh, that works. This is great. Oh, I would never have thought of that. And you pick that up, and it becomes, in your toolkit a little bit.
Well, in especially like when I've spoken to all of you guys, like I find there's commonalities that I'm like, okay, I can fall back on some of these, maybe they're not the most inspired when it's the same thing that everyone does, but at least it's like a safety net that I've built. I imagine it's the same for you, where you're like, you start to see patterns in the matrix where you're like, all right, we're always doing, an 8x right there for a key. Cool. I can, so I'll throw that in the mix.
Yeah. And I think, what's the best is when I see what I'm talking with a friend, with a DP, and he's telling me he did this or that, and it doesn't really make sense to me when he's saying that. And then here I am shooting, and my back is against the wall, and I'm really having a problem. I'm not going to do that. And then, or maybe that's what he meant. Maybe that's what. Let me try what he did. Yeah, and thank you. It works. So there's no moment like this, and even a lot of time after you've done it, and maybe you failed or you succeeded one way or another, and then you talk to your colleagues and to your and you are, I did this and I did that, and you say, oh, you know what, I did that last time. Oh, that. Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep that in my mind, in the back of my mind. I'm going to use it next time. That was such a good idea.
Yeah, it was Storaro shot The Conformist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you will see my work. You will see the color contrast. The Conformist.
That was the film. I saw it maybe 8 years ago for the first time, and that was the film that made me feel comfortable to relax a bit, because I had felt like I was behind the ball. Like, there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. And then I'm like, this movie was made in 1969. It looks like it was shot yesterday.
Right.
And I was like, okay, the techniques have not changed. Cameras have changed, technology's changed, but the work is pretty solid. Like, I don't have to be so nerdy about it, basically.
Yeah. There's the Conformist. I mean, you look, for example, his use of color, the color contrast, which at the time was just revolutionary, particularly when you're shooting with two film stock, either daylight or tungsten, and that's basically it. So, I mean, that was shocking. And now we're doing it. We're all doing it. And thank God, because we have digital, that sensors, that help us doing it very easily. But at the time, it was not. Big influence to our, and I mentioned it for me. I mean, the other one, particularly for American Primeval, is Days of Heaven. And Days of
sure, yeah.
I mean, not for my biggest concern when I was shooting, my biggest fight is don't use feel. Don't feel. Accept the key light. Go dark. And every time maybe I should feel, maybe I should put more, maybe I should be, I say, no, don't do it, let it go. It's a lot of that. And then there's another DP that one day says something to me that to this day, it's Claudio Miranda.
Yeah.
He mentioned to me, like cinematography, it's just about controlling contrast. So true. Just why not? It's all about controlling contrast. And I think about that all the time. You're absolutely right. Just control your contrast. You want more, you want less, you want brighter, you want that, just control that. So, there's plenty of things. Or another one is, it's all about depth. What am I trying to do? I'm not trying to make it more beautiful. I'm not trying to get an exposure. I'm trying to light just to give you a sense of three-dimensionality. I'm working with with a medium, a two-dimensional medium, and I want to make you believe that it's a three-dimensional medium. And my lighting and my composition and where to place the camera, it's all about that and nothing else. Basically, at the end of the day.
Well, and it's great to hear someone like Claudio mention it's just controlling contrast, because like sometimes I'll have to lead from behind. If I have a director who's like, maybe we're shooting some corporate thing or whatever, and they're like, what? They just want it to look nice, and I'm like, just everything you think, because I've had the same thing, but I usually say that like film is contrast in the sense that like we can't just be, for instance, actors can't just be at 11 all the time. They need to be. It's like music. You can't just metal is
and create depth. Control contrast and create depth. And you say, oh, it helps you because now you're not in a subjective world, which means by that, okay, I'm supposed to do a beautiful lighting. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to him. What is beautiful lighting? But when you say, okay, don't phrase it this way, phrase it differently. No, I'm trying to make this feel like 3D. Okay, so what would I need to do 3D? Okay, I need to have separation between this background and this foreground. I need to keep some shape on his face, on her face. I need to give it a sense, that there is something outside the window that is even bigger and stronger. Okay, so now, okay, it's starting to look like something. So instead of starting, make it beautiful, you start, no, let me start there.
Mm.
And okay, what is the mood? What is the emotion? What am I trying to convey to the audience? This is a cold place. This is a warm place. This is a dangerous place. Whatever it is that the script requires, or that my director wants me to create. That it's those crutches. Helps you sometimes take the problem and start in a different way.
Right. Well, and especially if you're a technically minded person, you probably don't immediately think contrast. You immediately think, okay, sky panel, no, a stereotube,
And usually I try not to think that way. I try to go at it from an emotional standpoint instead from a technical standpoint.
Right.
And even though I know, okay, I'm going to use this, I would like to use this, but I much rather don't express it that way. What is the emotion that I'm trying to convey? What is it that I'm trying to present? What is it that I'm trying to tell the audience? Before telling me, okay, I'm going to use M90 or M40 or, we're going to have some STI tubes there or whatever it is, no. And actually, a lot of the time, I think the best thing you can do as a DP is, play dumb.
Yeah.
That you don't know anything, and instead, the best thing that you can say as a DP is say, hey, I need your expertise. Talking to your first AC or talking to your gaffer or how would you do this? How the director is asking us to do this and this and that. And most of the time I have a pretty good idea on the way I want to do it. But I'm always interested, how would you do that? And you'll be amazed and you say, oh, I don't like this and don't like that, but I like that. And, if you connect it to this, that will help me achieve that. It's very interesting because filmmaking, and I think from being a crew member for so long, it's very much a collaborative art form. And you have, you choose your film, you choose your crew the same way a director casts his film, his project. And you try to create a world, where you see all those guys coming in and using all they have to offer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, certainly for me, the first time I got like an actual G&E team, I was like, I'm never doing this solo again. Your work increases 20-fold when you actually have other voices to either make you better or keep you from being worse. Actually, that I know we just said technical's not that interesting, but I do wonder, like as a longtime camera operator, when you are deciding on the shooting package for something that you're the DP of, is your primary, because every camera is so good, is your primary concern like operator comfort, or like making sure that the camera team isn't going to be hamstrung by some weird finicky part of that specific body or whatever?
Yes, many decision comes to play with that. I mean, I spend a lot of time deciding what is the camera package or the lighting package. And I agree with you. Without talking one camera against another, I think they're all wonderful. Today's cameras, I think they're even too wonderful.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. But I take in consideration many things where the logistics, where we are going to be, obviously the budget that the production wants me to work with. That comes into play. The type of filmmaking we are going to do in terms, are we on the dolly, are we on handheld, are we whatever else different? Where are we shooting? So that all takes, those are all the considerations that I take, that I use, that I have in my mind before I decide, which camera package I would use. I would spend more time, I spend a lot more time lens-wise. Lenses are much more important to me than the camera. And because I think nowadays the lenses are the only organic element left in the pipeline. That's one decision that gives something emotional to the frame a little bit. So I spend quite a bit of time choosing the lenses. You take, for example, American Primeval. Okay, we're going to be shooting at an elevation of 9,000 feet. I'm thinking, okay, let's have a uniform package. I don't want everything. I want everything to fit together just in case, We don't have all we need that accessories. They happen to be at the very bottom of the hill, so all of those things comes into play. So we're going to try to using Zoom as opposed to using Prime. I think I spend a huge amount of money to decide how can I be the most efficient and how can it works the best for the camera team or everybody else with equipment and so forth.
Right. I would have assumed there was mostly primes on that show because there's a lot of, like, for instance, just really wide angle close ups, a lot of handheld.
There is a lot of Zoom. I think I use a lot more Zoom than I used to before. And there's two reasons for it, particularly when you're shooting an exterior day. We are all complaining, and I say all of us, cinematographers, that the digital sensor is too short.
Right.
So we always try to soften it a little bit, and there is various ways to go about it. Either filtration, and other stuff you can do in post. And, it's always interesting to reinvent why are we doing the same thing over and over again. So I come from films. For 20 years of my career, I shot films. Going to film school, you want to shoot primes, you don't want to use Zoom. You want to be as sharp as possible, which makes perfect sense since you're shooting with a negative that's going to have to go through generation after generation. On every generation, is going to get softer, and softer, and you're going to lose resolution. Well, now we are in the complete opposite world. Now it's completely, we don't worry about that anymore. So we don't need to have it super sharp at the very beginning. So what is the difference for me to use the zooms where there's a whole bunch of glass in front or using a prime and putting a different filter in the front? It does not make much sense. So I'm at 10,000 feet. Am I going to bother the first AC to or the second AC to change the focal length all the time? Or should I use a good zooms and leave it there? Those are the decisions that I take.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's funny.
It's interesting to question why we constantly do the same thing. We don't do that often. I remember working my first movie with Michael. We were shooting film, and we have an unfortunate first AC. We cut, and he said, checking the gate. And Michael just lost it. He said, why are you making me waste my time? We're checking the gate. And his point was, okay, we've been checking the gate since the very beginning of filmmaking. This is 1990. Those cameras, you're going to get an error or a scratch in maybe 200 feet of film. And if there is a scratch, I got somebody for $200 can fix it. Why are we keep doing this?
Right. And when you open it up, you're going to potentially let dirt in there anyway.
Great lesson, that sometimes we have to rethink why we're doing those things because we are so used to do it. And those things may have been good at one moment, but maybe not too much now. So if I'm going to ask a crew, to carry and schlep gears, all the way to 10,000 feet, and I say, why am I using a prime and I'm putting a filter in front of it to soften it? Why don't I use a zoom that is already giving me a little bit more glass in front of it and it's a little bit softer? Those are the decisions that I think about.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy too now is with how many lenses there are. Like, there used to just be like a handful, and now there's hundreds of choices, and they're all made by computers, so they're like optically perfect. So now it's like the cheaper lenses that when a cheaper lens used to be worse optically, now a cheaper lens tends to be better. So it's like when you don't have a budget, everything looks sharper.
There's so many incredible lenses from the vintage. I use Panavision lenses. I'm pretty faithful to that, and I like the characteristic, the personality of each lens, and that's. I spent a huge amount of time with my first AC about that.
And you get Dan Sasaki.
And he helps you on figuring out, what you want and what you don't want. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's funny. I watched a few episodes of American Primeval, but obviously before that, I just watched the trailer just to watch it. And Mark L. Smith is my friend's dad.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh. And it also checks out that, I assume, was The Revenant kind of a reference point for this show? Because it's not very Western.
Yes. We didn't talk too much about it, but yes, simply because Mark Smith, is the writer and we're talking about the same period. At the same time, we did not refer too much. We were much more into, Jeremiah Johnson, then Mike Gibb and Mrs. Miller. Those were our reference. And you were talking about, logistic. I mean, this is a miniseries. This is 6 episodes. I think, when you're shooting a film, and particularly, I think the Revenant, when they were doing, I knew that I was not going to get the luxury that they had when we shoot, when you can wait for the sun, when you
Right.
can, you can say, okay, today is not good, let's not, this is a TV show, sunny or rainy or snowing, we're going to shoot. So I think that was by far the biggest challenge. And for me, on American Primeval is to stay consistent writing-wise when you have a weather changing all the time. And shooting a winter show, and most of it, some of it shooting during the summertime.
Right.
Rhetoric and matching it. I mean, that's the difficult part of it.
Well, and the other, I don't know if this was a touch point, but like in the first episode, for instance, there's that kind of like oneer, that like stitched together oneer, and that was giving me very Children of Men vibes.
Yeah. I think, Children of Men did it so well. It's a beautiful film. We didn't talk about it. I think the reason why we did it with a Warner, and that's per Pete, and Pete already had it in his mind, very much as a one shot or a peer. One shot is the true story about that massacre took place over 3 days. And we could not present it in the scope and the length. And so, Pete went the opposite direction. They just concentrated in just one shot, just for the audience to get, okay, here's the brutality that you are facing. So that was the reason why, we decided to do it that way. And in time, and said, if we cannot do it, let's not try to do it halfway. Let's just make a statement. Let's condense it, and let's do it just, I think it's 3 minutes, or I don't know exactly the length of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one gorgeous part of an entirely gorgeous, series. Yeah. But the thing that I'm fascinated by is I always find that exteriors, the simplest looking, like whenever you're like, oh, they just shot in the sun, it's always like, nope, there was a 20-ton package.
There's a lot of it. It's shocking how much gear and how much work it takes to make it look. Oh yeah, there was a sun there, and he just went in and he shot. Not at all. You took a lot of it, 12 buys, and the fill, and a whole bunch of stuff, all around it. Yeah.
So what were your kind of like, I don't know if you can simplify it necessarily, but like how were you trying to shape the sun to achieve the look you were going for?
I was always, so basically what I try to do is always where is the sun, and camera placement. It's all about camera placement. And where can you put your camera where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck for the longest period of time. I think that was my go-to position. And then from then, okay, if it goes overcast, I'm going to be a little bit trouble. Let me get something there. This way I can throw something that I can consistently match with the rest. And then if they go over here, let's have some negative feel over there, or let's have a soft sun. I think I had some stuff here from time to time. So that's how you try to manage it, to stay consistent and knowing that you're going to be sun, overcast, or whatever. And you're constantly itching your bed and cross your finger.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying, like having a lot of 12 eyes and stuff, were you doing kind of the classic, like maybe let the sun hit direct? Because I noticed there's a decent amount of hard light, but some of it is rather soft, but which could just be overcast. But, like hitting the sun and then just throwing as much neg down as possible.
Tried, and then it depends. For example, that scene, we shot it over 5 days. At the same time of the day, without knowing if I would have the sun or not. So hoping that I would have the sun, that the sun would rise there, but I cannot guarantee. And sometimes it did not. Sometimes, it was overcast. Sometimes it was a little bit not as intense. So you have tools all over to manage that. Okay, so I see what I've done yesterday or the day before, and I say, okay, this is completely different. I had more light coming this way. So I had work light here, so we were always, planning that. And on the day, and we have 30 minutes each time to do it. So we have 30 minutes. And so I tried with my gaffer to keep a lot of tools and not knowing which one I'm going to use depending on what am I going to get, what are going to be my contrast ratio this time. Thank God with digital, I could control the color.
Right.
And he said, okay, do I need field? The next day, I don't need field at all. I mean, it's so completely different from one day to another for that scene.
To maintain contrast ratios over 5 days, are you like still using your spot meter, or are you kind of focusing more on like false color tools and stuff like that?
I think I look at it more false color tools. I don't use my spot meter much anymore. But I really I look more at the field when I'm shooting. The still, I can tell, okay, I'm a little bit more this, I need a little bit more there. I got pretty good eye to see, okay, that's not going to work. And then, you're constantly also looking where am I at on my negative from yesterday to today. Okay, I'm over here. I got a lot more of this and a lot less that. So it's always this. And then we would, during the entire day on that scene, we will shoot during the day. And then sometime in the afternoon around the 4 p.m., okay, we will all go back to that position and replace it, start where we were coming in. And also what really helped is that, okay, I'm not in the open on that section number 3. So I can give myself a little bit leeway. Oh, they are under the carriage. I need lights here because then I cannot match. It's a lot of pieces going.
Yeah. And also, I found that the night scenes that you shot were particularly pretty. How are you handling, exposing that? Everyone has their own method of doing, moonlight or ambience or whatever. So I'm interested what your take is.
For those things, all the night work, lots of light, lots of big light, lots of condor, lots softbox. So I tried my go-to is usually try to get a good ambience level.
With like a balloon?
I did not use a balloon. I use where we call it an F1 rig. I use I think it was a box, a 12 by or 12 by 12 speed rail box. And I think we had at least 100 to 150 Astera tubes.
Wow. Just because they're battery powered?
Less power you need, but more importantly, because of the wind just can go through.
That's smart.
And because when you add the full, it would just move with the wind. So basically, and then the other thing that I really love with that setup, you don't have a stamp; it just spread. You don't see it you don't see the footprint of it on the ground, and it works out beautifully. And usually add it at 10-15% really low.
Yeah.
And then I had four machine on each corner of the field. On that machine, I had 2 or 3 360s. I had a sky panel, and then I had the rock and roll lamps on it, that I can point like this. That was my go-to, very normal, very specific on that. And a lot of it is overdone. It's overlit.
Yeah.
But you have to please, you have to make sure that you've got a thick negative. I wanted to make sure that we have a thick negative for post-production.
Yeah.
So give them a little bit more. This way we can bring it down, in post.
Yeah, it's funny. Before you got on, I just got off the phone with the team that shot Silo. And we were having the same conversation about darkness where I was like, you could, why not do that? And they were like, we didn't want to. And I was like, fair enough. Like the director wanted it to be just in the toe, just the most toey.
You know what? It's interesting because we did one scene, the very first scene of At Night that I've shot. And that day, unfortunately, the light on the Condor broke.
Yes.
So I lost a lot of my ambience, and we could not wait. We had to shoot. And but I was not concerned. I knew that I had plenty on the negative, even without that light. But post production
Not stoked.
came out, completely. And I remember my DIT. We sent them the raw footage. Just guys, it's all there, just to reassure them. But it's that's and I preferred it that way.
Mm.
But you have to make sure that everyone's happy.
Right. Well, and what camera were you, Venice?
I use Sony Venice 2 and Red Raptor.
This actually, so I've been the past couple days, I've been kind of like asking everyone about camera packages because there was like a weird owner operator question that I had come up with in my own head. But I'm just going to use this opportunity because I have you here. What is the primary difference between the Venice 2 and the Venice? Because it just seems, is it just smaller, or is there like
No, the Venice 2 and the Venice, no, it's about the same. The Venice 2 is a little bit smaller. But the big difference is the Venice 1 is 500 ISO, the Venice 2 is 800, and it has a dual ISO, so you are 800 and 3200. So you can set the camera whichever you want. And actually, it's interesting because between the Sony Venice 1 and Sony Venice 2, you have 500 and 800. It makes a big difference in your lighting package. I can tell you that because I did Gran Turismo. The Sony Venice 2 was not there yet out, and I did the Sony Venice 1. And I remember my gaffer telling me, wow, I need a lot more light than I used to.
Mm.
So that's the reason why, and the Venice 2, you can use a 3200 ISO if you need to. I don't think I did it on American Primeval. I think I was mostly 800. But on the movie I did after, I used it at 3200 actually.
On what, Novocaine?
Novocaine, yeah.
Yeah. Man, you've had a great year because Novocaine was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, actually, I finished American Primeval, and I went straight to Cape Town to shoot Novocaine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fun. Like I can't, it's weird to say I'm proud of you because I don't know you, but just like the career you've had is so much fun. Like I aspire to have this, to have Seabiscuit and fucking, what is it? Walk Hard on the same CV that's cool.
Yeah. It's interesting to work, and it's a lot. I told you, I was a camera operator for a long time. I was having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was not my plan, but it just turned out this way. And with Steadicam and camera operating, and I started working all the time and working with those wonderful directors and DPs and learning, and that's the key: constantly learning what they do and how you can make yourself better.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Apparently, you do have a heart. Like, you're doing the same thing I'm doing, just ratcheting through interviews. So I'll let you get to that one early, but we'll definitely have to have you back on to talk about maybe Novocaine and whatever else you're shooting. Because
anytime, it was a pleasure, and I always like talking about the craft. It's people who are passionate about it. I'm very passionate as well about it. But yes, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, man. And yeah, I think I'm gonna get my next tattoo will just be depth, contrast, emotion in a box, and I'll send you a photo.
Okay, that sounds good. Fair enough.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much, Kenny.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.